Hello and welcome back to the Joe and Toby Talk podcast, where we talk all things under the sun, from sport to James Bond to Roger Whittaker, potentially in a future week. Let us know down in the comments if you've ever heard of him. But yes, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Toby Jones, who has had a complete new lease of life with content creation, bringing out multiple videos over the last few weeks over on his channel Toby Jones, and he spent 20 minutes before today's podcast writing down loads of notes. No props this week as far as I know, but lots of notes in there, and well, I'll hand over to him. What you got to talk to us about today, eh?
Ben, there he is.
Good old Ben.
Right, those are the props done, unfortunately, for today.
Sad times.
Very sad. Of course, today we are talking about this. Forget it. I'll put it back later. Today, of course, we're talking about the second Ashes test, and I mean, when you mentioned Roger Whittaker at the start, I think I was just watching a video before this because actually I'm trying to grow the Toby Jones channel, and I was watching a vidIQ video about a couple of things that small creators can do to boost their videos, and one that was specifically not mentioned was mentioning that you might be producing Roger Whittaker content in the future.
Right,
I think that
okay.
might be a bit of a turn off, so don't do that next time. But anyway, today we're talking about the second Ashes test, which, spoiler, England lost. And I think if we'd have been battered, I'd have had quite a smug face, because my co-host was very jolly and, oh yeah, well, we're going to beat him, we're going to win, and we're going to come good. And then there was me. Actually, I did predict we'd win, and I think, I haven't gone back to the video, but I think I predicted we'd win by 4 wickets, which was on at one point, that we'd chase the total and win by 4 wickets. As it happened, we didn't. I think there's some criticisms of England to have, but we'll talk about Australia as well. So, a couple of points to start with. I think Bazball feels a bit more like Bielsa ball now. I was out on a walk this morning and I thought, this feels a little bit like watching Leeds when Bielsa was in charge.
Okay.
That as long as we scored more than the opponent, it was fine. Which obviously in cricket is the aim of the game, of course. But it was very much, we'll just go for it. And I understand that's kind of what Bazball is about, but obviously not to that sort of extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the way that England played in some aspects, and I'll refer back to my comments from the first test, that a more pragmatic approach would have been better. And that's exactly what happened at the start of day 5 with Duckett and Stoke. So it seems like those two learnt from the mistakes of day 4. But to start off with, I think that we're going to talk a bit about snooker, and we're going to talk about Olivier Marteel, because it looks like Jonny Bairstow and Ben Stokes took the Olivier Marteel approach.
Yes, that's a very niche, very niche reference, Toby. I'm not sure many people will understand that one, but of course.
Yeah, I've not took the hint there, have I? I mean, Roger Whittaker, Olivier Marteel. Who are these people?
Although to be fair, our demographic, we've talked a lot about snooker. I think we even talked about that protest at the snooker on this podcast. Yeah. So if anyone's going to get that reference, it's going to be our audience. So, yeah, of course, first day of the second Ashes test match at Lord's was very, very slightly delayed by a protest. And I'd be intrigued to have known what would have happened had the protest been successful. And what I mean by that is they actually get to put the powder on the wicket. Of course, you referenced Jonny Bairstow stepping in a little bit like Olivia did and grabbing the protester and carrying them off the field. It was quite the sight, wasn't it? And I know I was at work at this point, so I didn't see it till late in the day, but quite hilarious, I would say. And fair enough, brave of Jonny Bairstow to do that. And fair play, and obviously it again brings into question how many events this is happening at, and it's actually quite a worrying sight, really, because I always allude to things, and yes, it was a pack of orange powder or whatever, but how much worse could that have been? That's the scary thing, I think.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. On a bit of a lighter note, I sent you a picture about half an hour ago, which you probably haven't seen, and this is a post on LinkedIn from Finlay Andrews, who is I think a recent media graduate, I'd guess. And he's put on this LinkedIn post, I'll read it out. Thought I'd introduce myself to those who may have seen this photo circulating, and that's of somebody tackling a Just Stop Oil protest, which turns out to be Finlay Andrews. I'm pretty sure this wasn't on the job description when I signed up for a couple of hospitality shifts at the Ashes this summer, whilst on the hunt for a different type of runner role. Beyond the pitch, here's what this snapshot hopefully says about me. Unflinching in the face of challenge, willing to sprint into uncertainty, fully committed to the task at hand, quick to adapt in new environments, proactive approach when unexpected situations crop up. If your team could use someone that isn't afraid to dive in, I'd absolutely love to connect. I mean,
absolutely brilliant, isn't it?
Making the most of that opportunity.
Yeah, milking it somewhat.
Yeah, but I don't think we're going to milk that situation. That's for people who are more interested in politics and all that stuff should comment on. We're going to
that's for our election podcast this time next year, Toby.
Yeah, well, Rishi was there. Theresa May was there with Jeffrey Boycott, I think, yesterday.
Right.
Any other politicians? I don't think so. Piers Morgan was there, the wonderful journalist. But we're going down a very dark path, so let's just stop that straight away. But I think as a bit of a summary from my part, before we get into the nooks and crannies of what lost England the Test match, I think it's looking pretty bleak for England now in terms of them winning the Ashes. With England 2-0 down, they've got to go and win the next 3 matches because, of course, if it ends in a draw, Australia retain the Ashes. I think what this Test match highlights, and I'm going to bring in one of my points straight away, is that this now feels like a team in transition. You've got the old guard, Broad, but particularly Jimmy Anderson, who unfortunately is nearing the end for me. I know you said in the last episode that you thought Jimmy would come good at Lords.
I really did, yeah.
By no means did he bowl poorly, but it does seem like he's nearing the end. Jonny Bairstow was sloppy at wicket-keeper, and there was another very sloppy moment, which we'll talk about a little bit later on from earlier on today. So, apart from those guys, that leaves purely then in this starting 11, Root and Stokes as the experience. You've got your new guard then of Crawley, Duckett, Pope, Brook, Robinson and Tong. And then possibly in the reserve ranks, you've got Mark Wood or Chris Wokes, who I think probably should come in and replace Anderson in the 3rd Test match. And that also creates an additional batting space because the tail was very long in this Test match. I know that the Sky pundits have talked about a long batting lineup for England before, and it's been seen as a bit of a joke, but on this occasion, there was no suggestion of that batting lineup. They were quite right that, unfortunately, it was quite a long tail. So there was quite a lot of expectation on probably the first 4 batsmen, really, because after that you have Brook, Stokes, and Bairstow, very competent batters, but all of an aggressive nature, just by trade, really. So that put massive pressure on those guys, but I don't know what you think about that. Do you think that England are a team in transition, or do you think that maybe we've had a couple of bad games and it's the typical sort of, time for him to go? Is it too early? I don't know.
I think there's a bit of both in there. I think, for a long while, actually, we've been plotting who were going to be the guys to take over Broad and Anderson. I mean, Stokes himself is in his 30s, Root in his 30s as well, and, early 30s. Of course, and they will have a few more years, depending on their fitness. But I actually think you've got to look at these 2 Ashes matches, and it could have quite easily been, for 1 or 2 balls going elsewhere. It could have quite easily been 2-0 England, and I think the conversation, funnily enough, would be completely the opposite. Obviously, whether England won or not, if they held on to their catches in the first match, we'd have won that, no doubt. Second test match, I think a couple of maybe controversial decisions throughout the match have probably affected it either way. I think that the Starc one, or the catch last night, I think that ruffled England's feathers a little bit. And I think particularly the Jonny Bairstow incident today, as we're recording this, I think that inspired Ben Stokes actually to go on and get it a lot closer than it would have been. However, I think it could have easily been 2-0 England. We'd still have the issues in there. James Anderson's taken 2 wickets in the whole series so far, I believe.
Right, yeah.
Which is very un-James Anderson-like. He also hasn't bowled as many overs as I thought he would have, particularly around the new ball. When we're taking the second new ball, he's not been bowling those overs. Broad's been brilliant with the ball. Moeen Ali, of course, in the first test match didn't really do a lot, so I think we're lacking wickets where we'd normally expect them, and that's a big thing. So I get your point about transition. I think with Jonny Bairstow, it is costing us somewhat with the wicket keeping. I think you could say probably over this test match he cost us 43 runs.
There was a lot of talk
overall.
a lot of talk for a while now, wasn't there? That Ben Foakes is probably recognised as the best wicket keeper.
Yeah, I think particularly when Bairstow's had a year out, pretty much. He's not played a great deal. He obviously had his broken leg, I think, over the last few months. And yes, he played brilliantly last year, and he's done okay with the bat in this series at least. But sometimes there just isn't a place for certain players, and that's okay. It's fine to have depth in your squad. If Joe Root gets ill and you need to bring Bairstow in as a replacement for Root, that's fine. I think trying to keep everybody happy by keeping them in the team, I think is the wrong move. I think Ben Foakes is arguably one of the best wicket keepers in the world, and you're not even selecting him for a squad at the moment. And he really fits into our philosophy at the moment as well, Ben Foakes. He's an aggressive player. He can bat. He can get 30, 40, 50 runs quite easily at the lower end of the order. And if he's batting 8, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
The problem comes if he's batting 5. Then I see your point. But he wouldn't be. He'd be batting 7 or 8. I agree with you. I think we're batting very, very short at the moment. We've got a long tail. I mean, Broad batting at 8. He hasn't batted 8 since probably 2010, 2011. It's a long time since Broad has batted that high. It's a long time since Broad's been expected to contribute with a bat.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem. I think it was very telling, the final few overs today of how uncomfortable Jimmy Anderson was with bouncers, for instance, how uncomfortable Stuart Broad is with bouncers. And teams know that now, and that's why they'll target it. And
I think before,
but I don't know what the solution is.
With those two in particular, you could accept it when they were getting 3, 4, 5ers.
Yeah.
You could accept that, but I think at the moment there's that frustration that it's not quite happening. Actually, the likes of Robinson and especially Josh Tong, who had a really good test match, just a bit of a funny aside for those of you watching, that we released you're in charge of that side of things, but you released the preview for this test Tuesday, was it?
Yeah, the night before, yeah.
At which time I think we recorded it on the Saturday evening actually, and brought it out closer just so it was close to the match. And obviously we said that it'd probably be Mark Wood that was selected, and no suggestion of Josh Tong. And I remember you messaging me at work on Tuesday saying, well, we're going to look like complete fools now because Josh Tong's been put in the team, which I think is somebody that really we just hadn't thought of being put in the team.
Well, I mean, he played brilliantly against Ireland. You know, he bowled brilliantly, and it was at Lord's, I guess. I'd not even considered that. But I have to say, you know, particularly with the bat in the second innings as well, you know, he looked okay. Obviously, he's not going to score many runs, but if he can score 15 to 20, that's going to be invaluable to us, really, going forward. I still have faith in Anderson, and that's I think, actually, more to do with the Anderson getting less wickets has probably been more to do with the pitch than him. I think if you actually watch Anderson bowling, generally he's still bowling a terrific line, a tight line. He's not giving away many runs. He's gone past the outside edge. But
he was the cheapest bowler, wasn't he, in the first innings? So out of England's 5 seamers. So,
but that's the thing. But there's not enough movement in the pitches at the moment for Anderson to be getting anything out of that. He's a swing bowler, which is why in India, for instance, he's not as effective. And we've had, a very hot summer up until the Ashes. We had a lot of hot weather, a lot of, a lack of moisture, I should say, in the air. And I think the pitches have been really dry. I think they've been playing very subcontinental almost. Not quite as dusty and there's not been as much turn in there for the spinners, but in terms of there not really being anything for the fast bowlers, and that's why we've seen 98% of balls bowled in the second session of day 4 being short balls, and that's not Anderson's gig. And it depends. What is their game plan going into Headingley? Obviously, we'll look ahead to Headingley later on, but for me, the key to whether Anderson stays in the side is, are you going to keep going with the short ball tactic? Because if you are, there's no point Anderson being in there for me. If you're not, if you are expecting the pitch to be a little bit better, obviously we've had a little bit more wet weather recently, maybe up, I don't know what the forecast's like, but maybe look at that forecast up to the Headingley test. If there is going to be more rain, a little bit more grass on that wicket that we're expecting, then that's where Jimmy Anderson would come in. I suppose the only thing that was worrying is, I think it was day 2 and it was really cloudy, or day 1 actually, wasn't it? It was really cloudy, it was grassy, new ball, and Anderson still didn't get anything. So I suppose that's the disappointment there.
Well, I think as a bowling attack, generally on day 1, it was quite mediocre, really, and that was a big complaint. But I think just before my last point, before we get into each innings, I think we focus obviously a lot on England because we are fans of the England team. But I personally think that Australia are just too good for England. I think that obviously they're World Test champions. Just do we have to accept at this point that we're up against an all-round better opponent? If you look at the batting side, you have to question in each position, who would you pick to better the Australians? Root, Stokes, maybe Bairstow. Apart from that, no. Maybe David Warner's a little bit weaker now as an opener. Could you pick one of our openers? It's debatable, but I'm not too sure. And then from a bowling attack, obviously we had 2 of the best in the world in Anderson and Broad. Broad still looks good. I agree with your point actually about Anderson. I think he's been too good for him to just ditch him at this point. I think that would be unfair given the legacy and the success that Anderson's had. But when you've got Hazelwood, Starc, Cummins, and even Cameron Green as a pace attack, obviously Nathan Lyon's probably now out for the series as the main spinner, but Travis Head and Steve Smith are both competent part-timers, really, I would say, as spinners. And obviously that's a problem that England have got as well. We've no full-time spinner, albeit Reenan Ahmed could come in, but again, are we exposing the tail? I don't know what he's like with the bat.
Again, I think Ahmed actually isn't in the squad for
Okay.
Test
Not
3.
in the squad for the third test. I hadn't had a look at that before. So that answers that question then. But I think that. I don't know what you think about that quickly, just before we get into the first Australian innings.
I get your point about Australia. Although I think they've been...
It's not a diplomatic way to say you're wrong.
Well, I just think they've been very beatable, actually, in the first 2 test matches. I think had we played at our best, Australia would have had 2 pretty heavy defeats in the first and I think that's where I'm going with England. People haven't been at their best. Anderson's not been at his best. Stokes really hasn't been at his best until the 4th innings today. You could say Ollie Pope hasn't necessarily gone on and scored as many runs as he could have. Brook, nobody's really taken the bull by the horns and scoring a big 150, 160 regularly for us. And I think that's kind of what we're missing at the moment. Other than that, I genuinely don't think Australia have won the matches rather than just stuck in there a little bit longer than England. I honestly think that's why it is.
I think that's the whole point, really. I don't think either team's fired on all cylinders, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think England have been fantastic. I don't think Australia have been fantastic. I think that we said in the first match that Usman Khawaja very much carried Australia. And, in this match, the likes of Steve Smith's great innings and Travis Head, and then Khawaja again in the second innings carried Australia. So it's a good point to make. But I think let's focus now on the Australia first innings. So we talked about this a little bit in fits and starts, if you like. That obviously England won the toss on a cloudy first day, and drawing a blank, Pat Cummins, the Australian captain, also said that he would have bowled under the circumstances. So I don't really think that England batting first would have made a massive difference, but I haven't got a crystal ball, I couldn't tell you that. But I think that it was disappointing from England because, surprise, surprise, as we said, there's no way that Labuschagne and Smith were going to be as cheap as they were in the first test. And ironically, Khawaja was fairly cheap, so that took away some of that, only scoring 17 runs. Warner had a good go on 66, and a real positive that Josh Tongue got both of the openers out. He was costly in the first innings, for nearly 4.5 and over, but got the wickets of Warner, Khawaja, and then later Steve Smith for the 8th wicket at 393 for 8. So those guys weren't cheap this time round, and when you're looking at Australia being 316 for 4, and probably about 350, 360 at the end of the first day, and obviously Australia not declaring on 380 or whatever it was, it was a point that I think England had something to worry about, because some very good scores, and I knew straight away at the back of my head, I thought, well, England have got this long tail. I think if England would have bowled Australia out for 250, 300, maybe even 350, we could have said in that second innings, right, we can at least match that in that second innings and go into the second half of the match looking good. But I have to say that in that England first innings, we were actually saved by the openers, which is something that we haven't said for a hell of a long time, really.
I think it was the first 100 opening stand between openers in an Ashes test since, 91, wasn't it? And since 2013. So that's a long, 10 years, isn't it, since we had openers that have had as big a stand as that.
91 was the partnership for that first wicket, and even then, Crawley got out to a stupid ball, advancing down the line to Nathan Lyon and getting stumped in behind. I don't know what you think about Crawley. He's such a frustrating player, because you can see it's there. No doubt about it. He played well at Edgbaston, but he seems to get off the mark and then can't go in for the kill, in effect. And get a really good score.
I don't think that's what he's there for. I don't think he's there to score 150, 160.
He's not, but when you've only got 7 competent batters, 48's not really enough.
I get you. And I just think if he plays any other way, he gets out in the 20s, and I think that's. I think that's the compromise for me with Crawley is, yes, he's going to get out for 13 playing a bad shot, or he's going to get out for 48 playing a bad shot. But sometimes when it all comes off, he's going to do what Stokes did today and get that 120, 130. And I think, honestly, might be speaking too soon, and it might be because I'm pretty biased about this player, but I think Ben Duckett is a very similar sort of player to Marcus Trescothick, and I think potentially our best opener since then, really.
Okay.
That would be.
I think there's merit to that, but early days to say something like that.
Yeah, it is early, but I just like. I like how he goes about his innings. He is a little too flashy sometimes, but that's kind of the way we play. I think if there's somebody that's going to stay up there for a good few years, I think it's going to be Duckett. I hope Crawley is as well. I was amazed before. Crawley's played 40 test matches, I think, now, which is bonkers. But, I think Duckett is very, very good and will definitely, get us a lot of runs in this series. And little prediction that maybe he's going to be the highest English run scorer in this series.
I panicked then. I thought you were going to say he'd be the highest in total. I'm thinking that you're really putting the praise on Ben Duckett here, blimey. But I don't think that's such a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, we are quite a way away now from, and I know I mock him, but it's been 4 years since Keaton Jennings has opened the batting for England. So Crawley has been a permanent fixture for a while, because was he at number 3 for a while?
Yes, yeah. Crawley used to play at 3 behind Burns and
Joe Denley.
Yeah, Joe Denley was in there.
Yeah, Joe Denley. Yeah. Let's move on. Oh dear. But I think genuinely, without those 2 openers in the opening stand, I think we could have been looking at a follow-on score. With how the tail was exposed, and how after Harry Brook went. In fact, after Ben Stokes went at 279 for 5, we only then got 46 for the next 5 wickets. So, which is
a real feature of England under Joe Root. Actually, that's I think that was. We've always been pretty good at collapses and very small amount of runs for a lot of wickets, and I think that's maybe where we are behind Australia at the moment. I don't think it's in the top order. I actually think over the course of a series, I reckon our top 5 will probably score a very similar number of runs to the Australian top 5. I think where Australia are stronger is in 6 to 11. With their resolve in surviving and picking up a few boundaries, rather than what we did have, which was Broad 12, Robinson 9, Tung 1, and Anderson not out. If you look at the Australian bottom 4, you've got 6 for Starc, 22 for Cummins, 7 for Lyon, 4 for Hazelwood, and overall that's going to just give you 10, 15 extra runs in a test match, and that could make all the difference, because in an innings, if you double that, that's 30, and 30 is starting to get a bit more significant when we lost this test match by 43 runs.
Yeah, talking about our top 5, can I just put some praise on Harry Brook? Because I think he's had a brilliant start to his test career.
He's very composed, isn't he?
He is, yeah. Apart from the second innings. We'll touch on that in a little while. But, in this series, he's got an average of 33. Amazingly, in his test career so far, he's got an average of 67.8, which was probably massively skewed by 186 against New Zealand and 153 against Pakistan. But that's a really solid average, and an average of 33 in this series. He looks to be a good, solid bat, and I think he could be, when I talk about the new guard, somebody like Duckett, potentially like Crawley, although I'm not totally convinced yet. that there is some hope, and obviously Ollie Pope as well. But Ollie Pope again, I'm still slightly sketchy about, because Pope's got the potential to get out to a bit of a silly ball as well. So Harry Brook has had a very good start, really good start to his England career. We've talked about the lower order, if you can call it. I mean, from Stokes onwards, just collapsing, scoring what's that? Just over 50 odd runs between them. Which, at the end of the day, the four bowlers, Broad, Anderson, Robinson, and Tong, they're not there to score the runs. So that's one of those things. But when Australia have got 400 odd, for England to then only get 325, already puts England at a bit of a disadvantage, obviously, because they're behind. But looking then at what Australia could do in the second innings, at 187 for 2 at one point, I think we were very much sat at the middle of, I think it was the middle of, I guess it was middle of yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah, of course. By sort of lunchtime yesterday, thinking this is done, because Australia would have been 270, 280 ahead, 8 wickets in hand, and it looks all over.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Australia lost 2 quick wickets before lunch in Khawaja and Smith, which, ironically, I think I said to you at the time, but I watched about half an hour, because I watched a little bit of the Formula One sprint showdown qualifying events, and then put the cricket on, and not much was happening, and looked dead as a dodo, the pitch, and then switched it off for 15 minutes, and sure enough, I come back to it, and Australia have lost 2 wickets. But Australia losing Khawaja, Smith, and then Travis Head very cheap as well for 7, put a match that was 187 for 2 to 197 for 5, and that changed the complexion of the things completely, didn't it? That was a massive turning point, really.
Yeah, I think the Australia second innings was very similar to the England first innings. If you think about England, they were 188 for 1, and England could have really pushed on from that point. Australia were 187 for 2. They could have really pushed on. They could have scored 300, 350, 400 in that second innings from that platform. But they didn't. They lost wickets. And again, it's a short ball tactic. This is what happened with England's first innings. Of course, the Australians just thought, well, this is going nowhere at 188 for 1. Let's try some short stuff. And lo and behold, they got Duckett out very quickly. After that, they got Joe Root out as well. And, it is a bit of a shame, really, that happened from England's perspective. But then I suppose it then foreshadowed what happened in the Australian innings, because then we had that session, which I mentioned it before, where 98% of the balls bowled were short. It was ridiculous. It was, essentially 30, 40 consecutive overs of bounces, which I've never seen happen before. I know England used to like to do it a lot when they had Steve Harmison bowling and Chris Tremlett, people like that who really got into the pitch. They were tall lads and really got the ball into the pitch, nice and high up towards the neck. And England don't really have that pace at the moment. It's quite funny in a way, quite sad as well, watching Ben Stokes bowl at the moment. Some of his balls, 73 miles an hour. He's more like Paul Collingwood than Chris Tremlett right now. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but it worked. Yeah, we got wickets, we kept it tight, and I think that was really important at that point. Again, we kind of let the tail go a little bit. Obviously Starc got 15, Cummins got 11, Nathan Lyon hopping on one leg managed to get 4. I think the tactic, and I think Australia were guilty of this as well. When we get down to the tail, we should be bowling at the stumps, really. Or more common at the stumps. Stick with your short ball tactic, but at least every 3 or 4 deliveries, sticking a Yorker in there. Let's get these skittled out quickly. Because
particularly to Lyon, it was painful.
Lyon was, walking 2-3 yards left of his stumps. There was no way he was going to be able to keep the ball out if you balled at the stumps. I'd have fancied my own chances of hitting the stumps with Nathan Lyon there, if I'm being brutally honest. I used to bowl a good Yorker, actually, when I was playing school cricket. But
was that 90 mile an hour?
It wasn't quite 90 mile an hour, no.
90?
Probably, yeah. But yeah, we're just leaking runs at the end of an innings. 36 extras as well we gave away in that second innings, and it all adds up. 36 extras and nigh on 50 runs from the bottom 4 there, and all of a sudden you win the test match. That's where I think we're weak at the moment. And the short game plan's working. It's keeping it tight, but also when it gets to the tail and they're whacking it around a little bit, you can leak runs. You need to be going for the stumps a little bit more, in my opinion.
Yeah, when Starc got that 6 and a 4, my head's just in my hands. It's crazy. A little bit like, I don't know if you saw Jeffrey Boycott when Harry Brook got out. I think it was in the second innings. Got head in his hands as well. Oh dear, yeah. I felt like that a couple of times. But I guess really that's it for the Australian second innings, isn't it? And we get to...
Yeah, and we're chasing, what was it, 381, I think was the target. Memories of this time last year where we chased 373 for 3, I think, against India, who of course are probably the second best test team in the world. So I think there was hope going into that innings, but I think a lot of it depended on last night. And I think you said, let's get the stumps without losing any wickets. And I said, well, I think they're going to try and get to 150 tonight. And I think they did try and get to 150, and I think that
didn't quite work.
That was the problem. Obviously, we were 9 for 1 pretty quickly. Duckett was dropped. He was given out LBW, and he reprieved himself with a review. Pope got out to what everybody is lauding as an incredible delivery, but I don't think it was necessarily. There was a lot of movement in there. It was a very fast ball, probably the fastest we've seen in the match, but that's mainly because we've got Ben Stokes bowling 73 mile an hour. I think, honestly, it was the movement of Pope and leaving that gap between his bat and his pad. He needs to get forward a little bit more with that. And I said at the time, a batsman like Root doesn't get out to that. And what I didn't mean, or the way you took it was, Root's one of the best batsmen in the world. I just think Root's got a better technique than Ollie Pope, for instance. And you've seen, actually, a few balls later, Starc bowls the exact same delivery and Root gets forward. He defends it. I'm even... you can't see this, Toby, but the people at home can see me gesturing how he gets forward and defends that delivery. I think... particularly with a left armour to a right-hander, the left armour coming over the wicket, you've got so much of your body and your bat in the way. There's no way that should be getting through the gate and hitting the stumps, in my honest opinion. And I think that was a key moment. Pope going quickly. Then, of course, Root got out to a short ball. It was a fierce short ball from Pat Cummins, and... it's one of those things, you put your bat in front of your face to protect it, and maybe that's what England need to do over the next week. They need to get Steve Harmison back and bowl at 90 mile an hour bouncers to the neck and practice getting out of the way of them, because I think we need to duck out of the way a lot more of that type of delivery. Root gone, and then Brook, as you say, 45 for 4. And I believe, did the rain come late on? Was there any rain last night, or did we just bat to the close?
We batted to the end because.
Oh yeah, of course it was.
Duck it drama, didn't we?
Yes,
with,
of course.
The Starc catch, and I actually didn't see it live. In fairness, because I actually gave up at 45 for 4. I thought this is just ridiculous, and I genuinely thought the way they were going, it was going to be all over by Stumps.
Yeah, I mean, we got to 114 for 4, didn't we? By the end of the day, I mean, not far off my 150 prediction.
Except you didn't say before.
I didn't say it would be 4 wickets down. I think had we not lost 4 wickets, it would have been 150, 160 probably. But they got through to the end, 115 for 4. Duckett was going well. Stokes was there. And we came into the final day thinking, well, it's probably not going to happen.
Well, Duckett should have been out last night.
Oh, you think that?
Yeah, I do. I really did. I didn't see anything wrong with that. I mean, it was a solid, secure catch. It was just a typical thing that's done. You know, that once you've caught it, you tend to chuck it up in the air.
Well, yeah, that's not the reason why it was not given.
No, but
it was the fact that when he caught it, he dragged the ball along the floor, and the ball was touching the floor at that point. That is, to be fair, the way I've seen it given over the years, you know, particularly in the slips, you know, when they catch a ball at floor height, and if the ball does hit the floor, it's not out. And I think it was fair enough, actually. I think it was the correct decision, actually.
But I think if he'd have gone last night, it would have been all over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Starc, it was him that caught it, wasn't it? I think he was a bit complacent with it. You know, I think realistically, he should have, once he had his hand on it, he should have turned his hand the other way. But that's just not the way the human reaction goes. You put your hand down to stop the rest of your body falling, and in his hand was the ball. So for me, he put the catch down. So I think it was the perfect decision, actually. I know Australia were very unhappy with that. England...
That was very minor from what was to come.
Yes. No, absolutely. But it was very important that we had Duckett and Stokes overnight. But the big worry was that you've got Bairstow and then you've got Broad after that. And with the best will in the world, I don't think anybody came into today expecting an England victory. You know, I had lots of talk and lots of nonsense about, while Ben Stokes is there, you've got a chance. And I hadn't seen any evidence of Stokes playing anywhere near that level required.
He needed a score, didn't he, today?
He did need a score, and I think actually, I alluded to it before, I think the controversy with Bairstow inspired him today. You know, a little bit like, another snooker reference here, a little bit like Ronnie, you know, when Hossein comes out and doubts him, and then he comes out and absolutely thrashes him 13-2 in the second round, and I don't think anybody expected that. Nobody had seen the evidence Ronnie was playing that well, but a little bit of doubt, a little bit of controversy in there, fired him up, got him playing his best stuff, and I think that's exactly what happened with Ben Stokes, actually.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
As we said before, I mean, as you said, you know, in tongue-in-cheek, very much so, that... If Stokes, Bairstow and Duckett all get tons, then we win the match. No problem. But I think it was, there was a bit more to it than that. But as I alluded to at the very start of the video, it was nice to see that they came out and played a bit more pragmatically this morning, because I think on the face of it, to think, well, you need 260 in a day, or whatever it was, close enough, that was more than achievable. So there was no need to start hoofing the ball round. And actually, Ben Stokes, as the biggest proponent of baseball, has actually probably been the most against it, because in the first innings, we had Crawley with 100 strike rate, Duckett with 70-odd, Pope 66, Root 52, but very short innings, Brook 73, and then Stokes with the strike rate of 29, 17 off 58 balls. So Ben Stokes, not necessarily himself playing the baseball way in some of these innings, and that very much rang true, because I think he was was he something like 60 of 130 balls or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
That sounded about right. So a very measured approach for the first hour, and then of course Ben Duckett goes, and a bit of a sinking feeling after that of thinking, right, England still need 200 at this point, and it's very much a case of Stokes and Bairstow got to get 100 each to give them any chance, and it was unfortunate. But then obviously what came next, we'll get your view on it first, because I don't actually know what your genuine view on this is with the whole Bairstow wicket.
Well, I didn't watch it live, interestingly. I was watching the F1 at this point. I believe. I don't know.
Bairstow was out before the F1
was
started.
he? I don't
but
know.
Anyway, yeah.
Don't know why I wasn't watching it. But it was, I think, very unsportsmanlike, actually. I know there was a lot of controversy. The thing I think it's akin to is, when the bowler runs in, stops and whips the bails off at the non-striker's end. I think it was exactly the same situation. I don't. You can say Bairstow was as clumsy all you want. At the end of the day, I think it was very clear the ball was dead. Bairstow wasn't running. He wasn't. He'd come back. He'd scratched his crease with his foot. The ball was dead, in my opinion, and I think 999 times out of 1,000, the wicketkeeper throws that to his slip, and they start throwing the ball around. However, in this particular instance, they decide to throw it at the wickets, and obviously Bairstow's well out of his ground. It is technically out, I suppose. I just think, much like it's technically out when a bowler stops and runs you out at the non-striker's end, much like, I suppose, you could say technically Mitchell Starc had full control of that catch yesterday. But it's all technicalities there. It's not in the spirit of the game. For me, I think that was a big moment, and I think Australia kind of knew what they were doing there. I don't think it was all with intent from Carey at that point. You see it quite a lot with when there's a spin ball and the keeper whips the bails off pretty much every ball, looking for a stump, and even if they're 10 yards into their crease. But once they've thought about it for 5 minutes, they know exactly what they're doing there, and they took the opportunity. They didn't play the bigger man, if you like. They didn't play in the spirit of the game, and they thought, if we get Bairstow out here, that's going to make our job a lot easier. That's my personal belief at that point. And I think that's a shame, actually, for the sport, because I think had Nathan Lyon, for instance, been running between the wickets yesterday, right? Hopping on one leg, falls over in the middle of the pitch.
Joe, full well it's going to happen. They're going to go straight for the bails.
Yes, but I don't think they're going to rush over there. I think somebody walks over there, knocks the bails off, then goes and checks lines.
Doesn't that just make it worse?
Well, yes, but I don't think what they do is lob the ball at the stumps and then run around the pitch celebrating. I think England have a lot more class than that, and I think that's what the shame was. Australia can do what they want, but I think at Lord's, in an Ashes test, in front of the whole world that are watching, I don't think that was right for me.
I'm going to go against you on this, because I think it was, in my view, completely fair game, to be quite honest. I know what you're saying about the whole laws of the game thing, and I think Bairstow was clumsy. I think in some aspects you're right. I think that it was really a dead ball, but for Ben Stokes to come out and say, well, we wouldn't have done that, I'm sorry, They would. They would have done that because it's such fine margins as we've alluded to. We probably looked at 4 or 5 elements that could decide this Test match.
I don't know. I honestly think England are more in this new era. I think England are more about the spirit of the game, the entertaining value of the game, and not so much about the win or loss. And I honestly fully believe England.
This is my problem with basketball. Like, that's just a complete wrong approach to take. There's a time when you've got to start thinking about wins, because in any sport that's the main goal.
Yeah, it's tricky though, because cricket isn't that type of sport. You know, it's like in snooker, for instance, when you call a foul on yourself. You know, it's a gentleman's agreement.
I think snooker's a slightly different approach for being an individuals game, because there's a lot more pressure on O'Sullivan, or I was going to say Henry for a minute. Christ knows why. O'Sullivan or some of his contemporaries, an individual decision, and they take a lot more scrutiny for that. I think for me, the big thing at least is that I don't think that decided the game. I think we alluded to it beforehand that with those two being the only two left. I think if it would have been maybe Joe Root that would have been given out like that at England only 2 down, I'd have been a lot more perplexed about it, because that would have been absolutely huge. But as it turns out at the time, it didn't happen. But do you know what? I think it actually was quite positive for England, and particularly Ben Stokes, because that anger, as I think you alluded to earlier, actually made him press on. And Stuart Broad had plenty to say, didn't he, when he came out mouthing off about it, and some of the hilarious force putting the back in the crease. That was good crack, between the two sides. But for all the moaning about baseball, right, for about an hour or so, I just took all that and parked it, because that man, Ben Stokes, when he plays like he played, I don't think there's anything better in sport, is there? He made it look like he was playing against the local pub team, smacking the ball around, 4 sixes. It was just absolutely immense. And maybe when England needed 70 or 80, did I really start believing? Well, it was probably 80 or 90, because Stokes got out with England needing 70, I think, or 80. It was only at that point I thought, I tell you what, we've got a chance here. We've got a real chance. But Ben Stokes was awesome, but ultimately he was left in such a awkward position going at it alone. And maybe Bairstow would have helped, but again, I think the two factors do combine here, that I don't think Stokes would have got that sort of score if Bairstow was there as well.
I don't think Stokes would have played that way had Bairstow been there. And I think that's the ultimate thing, I suppose, that bit of controvert. You know, both matches have been very memorable. I think that it'll actually be remembered as a classic Ashes series if the other 3 matches are anywhere near as close. And that's what England have come into it wanting to believe. And I know lots of people, yourself included, will say no, winning should be the priority. And I think that's for Australia, that is the priority for them. And I think it shows. They're more ruthless. They take less liberties than us as well. But yeah, had Bairstow still been there at when Stokes went, perhaps we could have done it. But it very quickly turned around, and it, Broad out first, then Robinson, or other way around, Robinson first, then Broad, and then you're left with the 2 tail enders in Tongue and Anderson. And as much as they went on and they had a 25 partnership, in the end it wasn't enough, and Australia win by 43 runs and now lead the 5-match series 2-0. However, the one glimmering bit of hope, I suppose, is that England haven't won at Lord's in an Ashes series for 74 years, so we weren't expected to win at Lords.
That's clutching at straws.
Yes, we're 2-0 down. There's still 3 matches to go, and we know there's going to be results in those 3 matches. I think a draw's out of the question, just the way both sides are playing. Australia included in that. I don't think Australia would play for draws either, so unless they were down to maybe the 9th or 10th wicket. And, you know, looking ahead to those 3 matches, you've got Headingley, of course, the scene of another Stokes heroic performance in 2019. You've got Old Trafford, which, of course, is Anderson's home ground. And then the Oval, which we have a really good record at the Oval. So I think that there's things to be positive about going forward. I don't think England need to change their approach that much. I think perhaps get a little bit more resilient to the short ball. Don't play it as many of them. Pick your moments to attack. But other than that, and also pitch it up to the tail enders. I think that those are the 3 things I'd maybe say about England. Other than that, they could have quite easily been 2-0 up at this point, and I think there's a lot to be said about that, because I think, as you say, I think on paper, Australia are a much better side than England at the moment. And for England to be running them this close is very impressive, in my opinion.
It's almost like a cycling analogy, isn't it? Because I've been playing a lot of that, as you know, recently. That it's almost some short sprints that have really harmed England. The falling for the short ball in the first innings, and as you say, pitching bouncers to the tail enders in Australia's second innings. Some of these things probably costing England, I don't know, 20, 30 runs at a time. But as you say, they all add up, and England could have won this Test match by, 3 or 4 wickets had that not been the case. So you make a great point there. Just looking at the squad for the 3rd Test, so as you say, Rain and Ahmed not there. Are you going for the same team in the 3rd Test?
I think they'll make changes. I think there's only
without Josh Tong played, it's difficult to drop him.
I think that there's only 3 full days of rest, and I made this point in our Ashes preview. There's 3 full days of rest between these matches. I don't think Jimmy Anderson is fit enough to play, actually, at Headingley. I think they'll rest him, or in quotations, rest him, and have him come back for Old Trafford at his home ground. I think that makes sense to me. Give Anderson a rest, give him a week to maybe go back to Lancashire and go and pick up some wickets, get some confidence back at Old Trafford, and see where he comes out the other side of it. Mark Wood, I think he would have played this game had he been fit. So the only thing I can assume about Wood is that he's not fit. So
yeah, they said he was about a week away.
Yeah, so again, is he going to be ready for Headingley? I'm not sure. So Chris Wokes would be the one I'm thinking to bring in for Anderson. And then you've got to think, do we need a spinner? I don't think we do. I think Root is perfectly serviceable. I think it would be a mistake if we went back to Ali. The only reason I would suggest possibly going for Ali is for a bit more bat and depth. But that's not going to happen. I think it's going to be virtually the same side. I think Wokes is going to come in for Anderson. That's what I would do personally at this point. Give Anderson a rest. Give him a week to get ready for his home test at Old Trafford. And if that ends up being his farewell, that match, then so be it. And I'm sure that there isn't many a better place for Anderson to go if that should be the case. But, there's nobody else in the squad that can keep wicket other than Bairstow. I suppose Ollie Pope can, but I don't think they're going to burden him with that. So, it's a very underwhelming squad selection. Dan Lawrence isn't going to play. You can't get him into that squad. And Mark Wood, I don't think, is fit enough. So
I mean, I'm just thinking about this in the background because I think Wokes would be brilliant to bring in at number 8 for he's solid bowler, obviously, but for his batting abilities as well. I think he's a player that can get England 50 or 60 runs in the Test match. Is there, if Wood's fit, a possible merit to bringing Wood in for Tong or Robinson because of his batting ability? England losing bowling because you've got Stuart Broad and one of Robinson, probably Robinson, let's say.
Robinson's got a lot of wickets in this series so far, but actually I think Wood would be better at what Robinson is doing.
I think for me the perfect strategy is to bring both Wokes and Wood in, but for their batting ability, because both of them combined probably get England another 100 runs across 2 innings.
Oh right.
Well, as in between them as part of the 2 innings, so 25 each, which I don't think is ridiculous. Whereas really, Robinson, Tong looked promising, but I don't think he'll keep that up necessarily. But I think they could come in and do a decent job batting, and then. They're perfectly competent bowlers. And then, of course, you've got Stuart Broad and one of Tong or Robinson.
I mean, that's the other thing with Broad. Is he going to be fit enough to go again for another 5 days? I think that's the question.
If not, I think if both Broad and Anderson are out, that's a real test for this new guard, isn't it? Whether they can.
Yeah, but I think it could work. I think it's risky. All the matches are must win now. I think ideally England at 1-1 would have probably rested Anderson and Broad. Can you afford to do that 2-0 down? That's a big question, isn't it? Particularly Broad, the way he's played the last 2 matches. But does he fancy it? Does he fancy going again for another 5 days? It's going to be tough. I think, again, the toss is going to be very, very important. On Saturday-ish, is it? Thursday.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be important for England to be batting first to try and get some energy into those bowlers, ready for another hard slog. I don't know what the weather looks like. Obviously, it's usually generally a little bit cloudier up north in Leeds and Manchester than it is in London at this time of year. So does that then bring you back into Anderson potentially? But I don't know. For me, it would be Wokes in for Anderson. I'd like to see Wood in as well, possibly for Robinson. But other than that, I think we're not going to get much better. I have a horrible feeling, though, that they're going to bring Moeen Ali back. And I think that's an appalling decision, personally.
Well, knowing our predictions from this first test, we're probably going to see a shock reappearance and coming out of retirement of Ryan Sidebottom, who miraculously enters the side.
You know what? I would take Ryan Sidebottom over Moeen Ali right now. I really would.
I think I'd take Flintoff over Ali, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, whatever happened to Stephen Finn as well? I mean, this is the thing. We've got very few out and out fast bowlers. Mark Wood is one of those. Potts isn't in the squad, is he?
No.
Odd,
that's odd.
Yeah, I mean, when they said that they'd announced a 15-man squad, I didn't realise I could see players out of the squad that haven't been in it, that have been in it so far. So, yeah, Mark Wood. I think we do really need somebody that can bowl consistently 90 mile an hour. I think that's been shown, particularly at the tail. And those bouncers, are going to be so much more intimidating coming from Mark Wood than Ollie Robinson, in my opinion. As much as I like Robinson, I think we need a little change up there.
Yeah, but I think, on the whole, it's been really good to watch, despite the bitter pill that England are 2-0 down. I think it's, as I said in the last episode, it's like the World Snooker Championship. It's so gripping and captivating. I lost a little bit of interest yesterday once Australia had got to sort of 250 ahead with 8 wickets in hand, because I thought, they've got this game. But it's amazing just how quickly, like the game of snooker, it can turn so quickly on its head, pardon the pun. And, things can change really quickly. So I don't know what we're going to be saying, because it's not going to be this time next week, of course, because the test match goes into Monday. So we'll be seeing another weekday end to the test match. So we're going to see what, day 3 and 4, I guess. Yeah, day 3 and 4, Saturday, Sunday. So, but based on England's approach, it could all be done by the end of day 4. But I don't know. Who knows? But I think just a parting comment from me that despite the results so far, obviously there's been a lot more talking points in this than the first test, because the first test, as you say, was a great test, but we weren't quite sure the way it was going to go. I think we've now got more of a hint after the second test, but which has created more talking points inevitably. But yeah, I'm still really excited for that third test ahead in me. And if Australia go and win that, it might just create even more freedom for the series, for England to just go at it with both barrels, but let's see.
Predictions?
Yeah. Well, they didn't go too well for the second test, did they, for either of us? I'm going to go England win by 25 runs.
Oh, imagine. Wow.
It's going to be tight. Again.
I think it's actually going to go one way or the other. I think we've had two very tight.
Here we go.
Tight matches.
Covering all bases here.
I think we've got to back England, haven't we?
Yes.
England are going to win by 157 runs.
Blimey.
They're going to win quite comfortably. And I think I can see them scoring 450 plus in the first innings, actually, and really putting the pressure on Australia. I think now Stokes has had a score. I think he'll be pretty hard to stop in this series now. But we shall see. We shall see. Let us know your predictions as well down in the comments. I know Ben particularly likes commenting his predictions, and I know he was very upset at Glenn McGrath's prediction of 5-0. But we're looking like the ones that might be fools rather than Glenn McGrath. But we will see. Leave a like if you've enjoyed, and join us in a couple of weeks' time for the review of the third Ashes test match. Will we be sat here saying the series is all over, or are we going to say bring on Old Trafford and bring on that England comeback? We will see. Subscribe for plenty more podcasts of all natures, including Roger Whittaker podcasts. We'll mention that again. And
there's no we involved.
There's no we involved. Toby, you're full of crap, basically. Yes, but hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.